Joining me in the program now, the Shadow Minister to Angus Taylor, Mark Butler, here in the studio. Thanks for your time.
Pleasure.
So the New South Wales Police Commissioner has said today that he acted openly and transparently, nothing inappropriate in this phone call. Do you take him at his word?
Well, I take the Police Commissioner at his word, but the Prime Minister has said something quite different. He said that the conversation that he had with the Police Commissioner, according to the Prime Minister, involved a discussion about the substance of the inquiry. What's become clear today is that the government's finally succeeded in taking the attention off the embattled Minister for Emissions Reduction, and they've shifted the focus, frankly, to the Prime Minister's judgment. The idea that it was appropriate to make a call to the Police Commissioner after the launch of a strike force into one of his ministers is gobsmacking.
But putting aside, well, you can include the fact that he said the word substance. It was just the word, he didn't say more detail of that. The Commissioner himself has said this was just information in the press release, nothing more. If he's saying that, then Scott Morrison didn't garner anything else, did he, unless you're saying the Commissioner's wrong?
Well, the Prime Minister is telling a different story. I believe that the Commissioner, I don't understand why the Prime Minister continues to repeat in the Parliament and background to certain media outlets that there was a much more substantive report given to him about the way in which the inquiry is being conducted.
But it's just all on that word substance. So you're saying once he said that, that changes, even though the Commissioner is saying what was in the press release is what I told him. That's it.
The point Malcolm Turnbull made was a good one today, and that is that police inquiries, police investigations, particularly a strike force into a minister, not only need in a substantive sense to be conducted properly, there also needs to be a clear perception for the public that there is no political interference here at all. I mean, ordinary members of the public don't get to ring the Police Commissioner and ask them about an investigation into one of their mates or one of their colleagues. This has really run the risk of tainting this inquiry. It was an appalling judgment by the Prime Minister.
But we do have, again, from Mick Fuller, this was a reassurance that everything's fine. He said, we're not friends. He says, I've never been to his house. We don't go out to dinner. He's not a mate. And I didn't tell him anything untoward in that phone call. So even though you say Scott Morrison has said substance, we've got the Commissioner saying there's no change here.
I take the Commissioner at his word, but it's very different to what the Prime Minister has said, who has described the Police Commissioner, now you raise it, as one of his best friends, but also gives, much more importantly, gives quite a different description to the nature of the phone call yesterday.
Well, just with the word substance, he didn't go into a description of saying he told me this, this and this. It's that word substance.
Well, it is, and it also is some briefing to some media outlets this morning about the substance of the call. I mean, this all just goes to the point it was inappropriate to make the call in the first place. As Malcolm Turnbull said, it raises a perception that there are different rules that apply for Cabinet Ministers and members of this government than apply to ordinary members of the public who might be subject to a police investigation.
So Labor's been talking about the Code of Conduct. This does say that ministers will be required to stand aside. If there are charges, yes, but there's a grey area if there are not charges. It's if the Prime Minister regards their conduct as constituting a prima facie breach of these standards. So,
well, there's also 7.1. I think you're referring to 7.2.
Yes.
7.1 suggests that the Prime Minister can stand aside a minister during the currency of an investigation into the potential of illegal or improper conduct. And what we've seen over the course of this government, for example, under Prime Ministers Abbott and Malcolm Turnbull, is Mal Brough stood aside during a police investigation that concerned him. Arthur Sinodinos stood aside as minister during an ICAC investigation, so not a police investigation. And the minister who now sits right next to Angus Taylor in the Parliament, Susan Lee, stood aside during a departmental investigation into travel expenses. But under this new Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, the launch of a strike force by the police around the commission of 3 very serious offences, which carry jail terms of up to 10 years, suddenly doesn't warrant the same verdict that was applied under Prime Minister.
7.1 does say ministers must accept for the Prime Minister to decide in an investigation, so it's not an automatic trigger.
No,
except it's a possibility.
Going to the Prime Minister's judgment here and precedents here, very recent precedents around Prime Minister Abbott and Turnbull, but other precedents that go back Prime Ministers.
What about Bill Shorten
Labor,
standing aside?
Well, he wasn't a minister.
Right,
this is a code of conduct that focuses on the particular responsibility and privileges of ministers of the Crown. That is why ministers have always been held to higher standards through the ministerial standards promulgated by the Prime Minister.
When you talk about that standard, so we did hear very clearly from the Police Commissioner today, his reason for the investigation, which has strike force, and I agree it sounds ominous, but this is just the level investigation, that's all it's at. He says it's not far advanced. They haven't even ascertained if illegal activity has happened, for example. He's saying the reason there is an investigation is, one, the seriousness of the allegations, and two, the letter written by Mark Dreyfus. If that were the threshold, it would be very easy to make ministers stand aside, would it not?
Well, the importance is the seriousness of the allegations. The letter was written weeks ago. Presumably now the New South Wales Police have been considering the letter that Mark Dreyfus, the Shadow Attorney General, sent to them, considering the material contained into it, particularly the gravity of the offences that we raised. As I said, 2 offences that carry jail terms of up to 10 years and a third offence that carries a jail term of up to 2 years. And frankly, it doesn't matter, and it shouldn't matter where the reference is made from, whether it's the Federal Labor Party or the Sydney City Council or another concerned citizen of New South Wales. Clearly the New South Wales Police have made an objective judgment that there is a prima facie case that warrants an investigation.
Well, they haven't made that judgment.
Well, there is an investigation that's been launched. Plenty of times police will receive these sorts of referrals and make a decision not to initiate an investigation.
This appears to be more a presumption you're making because, as I said, he expressly said the reasons are the seriousness of the allegation, not the veracity of the allegation, the seriousness of it and the fact that it came from Mark Dreyfus. That doesn't say that they believe there's a prima facie case. That just means they're taking it seriously because it's come from our federal parliament, essentially.
Now, the reason for Ministerial Standard 7.1 is that a minister should stand aside to avoid any perception that they're continuing to work as an executive member of government while an investigation is underway, particularly, frankly, a police investigation. This is as much about perception as it is substance. I accept that the police investigation might end up at naught in terms of Angus Taylor's behaviour, in which case there'll be no particular sanction.
If there are charges,
from that point of view. If there are charges, well, that's a different matter altogether.
But
now, that doesn't change the fact that we still consider he has deliberately misled the parliament. There's a separate sanction for that. But so far as this investigation is concerned, the purpose behind 7.1, the reason why other ministers under this government, different prime ministers, but under this term of coalition government, have been stood aside during the currency of an investigation, is as much about perception as it is substance.
Can't we just wait until charges are or are not laid?
Oh, why have item 7.1 in the ministerial standards? Why did Mal Bruff? Why did Susan Lee?
Because it's an opportunity, and at that stage it depends upon whether or not it feels as though the prima facie case is the key word, right? Whereas at this stage, we've got Angus Taylor saying that it was downloaded from the internet, so there was no forgery. So there's a dispute as to whether there even is a crime.
Well, look, ministers, of course, we're not in a position yet to determine whether or not a criminal offence was committed by one person or another. It seems pretty clear that a criminal offence has been committed by someone. This is clearly a forgery. There is a forged document that has been made and used to influence the exercise of a public duty. We don't know by whom. That's a matter for the New South Wales
Police. We don't know
Police.
if it's forged. That's not ironclad. We can't say 100%. There could be a version of a website somewhere.
The Sydney City Council have released their metadata that shows very clearly that the version of the report with the true figures has been on the website.
Can you say with 100% clarity this is a forged document?
Well, to the extent that it is claimed by Angus Taylor that it was downloaded from the City Council website, yes, I can.
Another version of it somewhere.
Or the metadata from the council.
I understand
there's been the publicly available internet archives, the Trove database from the National Library, other publicly available internet archives.
I understand that's what it appears to be.
There is no other version on the website. Haven't been through 2019.
Can you be 100% certain this is a case of a forged document?
Well, why on earth would the Sydney City Council have come up with a document that involves their councillors undertaking 20 return trips to Melbourne, each of them per week, every week for 50 years, and 6 or 7 business class trips.
Perhaps there was a mistake made, that's the point.
Well, there is no evidence of that.
I understand that.
There is no evidence
I understand
of
that.
And Angus Taylor refuses to confirm where he got the document, except to say that it was directly downloaded from the website, the Sydney City Council website, by someone, when it is completely clear from the metadata and the internet archives that no such document was ever on their council website.
If it's found to have been a staff member acting without the knowledge of Angus Taylor, would he not be responsible?
Well, Angus Taylor is responsible. Ministers are responsible for the actions of their staff. Now, presumably, given this matter has been around for weeks, Angus Taylor and, frankly, the Prime Minister's office have conducted absolutely due diligence to investigate what might have happened by different staff.
But if he's relying on what someone said and they don't have the metadata, for example, and they're unable to trace it, I mean, I can't get metadata from a website I was on a couple of months ago. I don't know if you can.
Well, I can't, but I'm sure someone could.
If it's unavailable for whatever reason and he's having to rely on someone and they're found to be untruthful, is that still his fault?
Well, the government has never said, as far as I understand at least, never said that they are unable to trace the metadata involving, apparently, Angus Taylor or his office accessing the City of Sydney Council website on the 9th of September. They've refused to provide any evidence, including metadata evidence, about what, if anything, was downloaded from that website on that day.
Where we sit now, this rises or falls on whether there are charges or not. If there are no charges, for whatever reason, is that the end of it for Labor?
No, because it's quite clear. The only thing we do know from all of the evidence, the metadata from the Council and the Internet Archives, is that the claim made by Angus Taylor that these figures were directly downloaded from the City of Sydney website is false. There is the evidence.
Well, there's no evidence for it. We can't be categorical about that being false.
Well, the only way it's true is if the metadata produced by the Council is false and the publicly available Internet Archives, including the Trove database maintained by the National Library, is also false.
But if you're saying even if there are no charges, there's insufficient evidence, you'll still pursue him?
Absolutely. It is pretty clear on the face of it that he has misled Parliament, and the sanction for that under the ministerial standards is absolutely clear. There is no more important pillar of the Westminster system of ministerial accountability that ministers cannot mislead Parliament.
All right, so regardless, Labor pursues this. I mean, what if he can produce some metadata? Does that mean you'll stop pursuing it? I mean, are you open to new evidence coming in?
Of course we are. Of course we are, but this matter has been around for weeks. He has failed to produce a skerrick of evidence about where these figures came from, except maintaining, as recently as early this week, that it was directly downloaded from the website, when we know that not to be true.